like to tell people that I'm a tailor, but because tailoring doesn't pay very well, I have to resort to my side hustle as a doctor. So what type of doctor am I? Well, I am a doctor that upholds people's human rights. I am a forensics doctor, and I'm a GP that looks after people who have mental health, drug and alcohol issues. I work in justice and forensic organisations. I work in homeless shelters, drug and alcohol rehabs, domestic violence advocacy services, and I work side by side with hospitals to prevent and respond to violence, abuse and neglect. And one thing that I learned about being a doctor is actually the art of listening. And I learned this art of listening through my love of tailoring. See, when I was younger, I used to accompany my mother, who was a fashion designer, to her doctor's appointments. Because she had a disability, she had to see her doctors regularly. Often, I would bring my sewing, and I would be sewing in the waiting room. Sewing is a great it puts me in a space where you can actually listen. Your hands are busy, but your ears are busy too. And I was able to listen to how doctors spoke, but I was also able to observe how some doctors tried to make spaces safer. When I sew, I listen as well. As you pierce the fabric with a needle, you listen to the tempo of the stitch. It's like as if the fabric is singing. And I put these two concepts together, and the philosophy of medicine is embodied and expressed through my tailoring. But before I give you some examples, I'd like to show you my thimble. See, I sew with a thimble. I don't sew with a machine. All of my suits are handmade. And unlike a quilter's thimble, a tailor's thimble has its top cut off, so you can see straight through it. We place that on our third finger, and what happens is the tip of the finger pad is exposed. It's vulnerable to sharp objects such as needles, but that's not a bad thing. Why? Because it increases sensitivity. Now you can feel with your finger pad. And that's why, unlike quilters who can actually push the needle with the fingertip, tailors actually have to push the needle with the side of the finger. The fingertip pad, I think, is a good representation of practicing vulnerability and sympathy sort of sensitivity, or should I call empathy. It's going to hurt if you do that, and it's going to prick you, but that's not a bad thing if you want to create safe spaces so that people will feel comfortable to be safe enough to tell you what they need. The thimble that I have that's specially made for me is made with a soft metal, and over time it actually conforms to the shape of your finger. Very much like the practice of medicine, over time it's going to conform to your principles and your values. In addition, I use a soft, precious metal because it reminds me of who I serve. How precious and valuable are those people that we see as patients. The suit that I'm wearing today has the buttons sewn on, not with thread intersecting into a cross, but I use a different technique attributed to Naples, which is called Zamba de Gallina, which loosely translates as chicken foot. Because, rightly so, you can imagine that the way that the threads are shaped is like a bird's foot imprinted onto sand. But I like to think of it as a crow's foot because it reminds me of the place where I sew, Wagga Wagga. And for a long time it was thought that that meant the place of many crows in Wiradjuri, the local indigenous language. And for me, this is a really important concept to create safe spaces, to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and diversity, because there are some cultures and religions that don't want to wear crosses on their garments. And it's my belief and my understanding that there's some bespoke tailors that offer this service not to sew buttons on the garments with crosses unless otherwise asked to. The suit that I'm wearing today, it's constructed so that it's right over left. It's buttoned, the waistcoat is buttoned right over left, much like how a female garment is constructed. And here I'm really trying to embrace the concept of inclusivity. The way that I create my waistcoats is very similar to the techniques traditionally used to construct a tailored jacket, where there are layer upon layer of fabric that are padded together in order to create the chest to have a more tailored look. And there's a specific type of fabric that I use in order to create that chest padding. And I'll explain why. Because when I first came to Australia, my English wasn't very proficient, and I had a really hard time in primary school. I would get home, I'll take off my school uniform, and I'll put a pair of pajamas on, and I'll play in the front garden. See, I wasn't too worried about passers-by seeing me in my pajamas, because they made me feel myself. They made me feel safe. And to this day, I still use a little bit of pajama material to pad my chest area. See, if you are comfortable in who you are as a person, say what you wear, then it's actually validating for other people to feel comfortable with who they are as well. I'm not a doctor that wears a uniform such as a white coat. In fact, I sew a stripe down the side of my leg, and today I'm wearing an electric pink stripe. And it is to affirm individuality and diversity. And how I wish I remembered that when I first came to Wagga Wagga about 8 years ago as a junior doctor. I was a registrar. I felt the pressure to conform, and I really wanted to fit in. So what did I do? I wore shop-bought pants and a shop-bought button-down shirt, and I tried really hard to fit in. It was an absolute disaster. I wasn't myself. I wasn't authentic. I wasn't who I was, and I wasn't representing what I was for. And there was a moment of change where I decided to take off those clothes and donate them to the opportunity shop or to op shop them. And I created new clothes that made me feel safer so that I can create safe spaces for others. And I think creating safe spaces is really important in my role as a doctor. But I don't think that safe spaces should only be restricted to a doctor's room or a clinic or a hospital. It should be beyond. And that's why we should actually have this conversation now to engage in creating safe spaces, not just for the places that I work, nor government or non-government organisations, but actually in the community. And as an example, if you go down to the shops, if you say buy a cup of coffee, or if you fill your tank up with petrol, you should feel safe in those spaces too. So it comes back to what I was saying. How do we create safe spaces? It's actually through the art of listening, because people will tell you what is safe for them. So I'm going to wrap up now, and I've coined a phrase to sort of explain who I am as a person. I am a person that strives to create safe spaces as a forensic tailor. Thank you.